Hi, it's B. I'm going to show you in this video how to effectively rebut claimants with specific relevance to the pandemic, although once you get the hang of this, you'll be able to use rebuttals in all kinds of circumstances. But before we begin, I'd like to ask that you do watch all 4 of my videos. The links are below and they're all available on YouTube under Call to Action. And the reason for this is that each one of the videos contains some information that you might find useful as a stepping stone when it comes to dealing with a claimant face to face. Now, a claimant is someone who wants something or expects something of you. So it could be your children's teachers, it could be your employer, a doctor, and of course the various government enforcement agents. The reason I've decided to do this video is because I've watched several others, mainly of brave folk rebutting the police. And before I say anything else, well done guys, because I know from personal experience that it's not easy. And while I don't wish to take anything from anybody, what I've seen are really people barking short rapid fire sentences such as "I do not stand under," or "I do not consent," or "read the notice in the window." And what I'm really proposing is that we try to remember that whether we like their behaviour and attitude or not, claimants, particularly government enforcement agents, are also sovereign beings, and they're caught in the middle of this chaos, trying to do their job without any real understanding of what's at stake. Now, by saying this, I'm in no way condoning bullying, intimidation, or willful assault. It's just that while there's a definite need to get our point across in a firm and robust manner, let's be mindful that as far as it depends on us, we treat each claimant with respect, if only to try to engage them rather than end up alienating them. So let's begin by remembering some facts. You are a sovereign being, the living man or woman of the land. You stand under common law. The corporation government, on the other hand, is a business which enacts statutes under Admiralty law and enforce those statutes using implied consent. Be aware that silence and or conformity are taken as evidence of consent to the statutes the corporation enacts. The early years of propaganda program is a grooming process designed to ensure obedience and reliance on the corporation. Without a signed contract, statutes are unenforceable. Therefore, your words and your behavior are key to robustly rebutting the fraudulent removal of your sovereignty and your freedom. Okay, so we're going to take a look at, over the next few slides, at various ways to rebut claimants. We're going to begin with business owners. So when you're confronted by a business owner or one of their employees demanding that something of you, like you take a temperature check or you put your mask on, first of all, remember to breathe. Breath is very calming and it gives you a chance to center yourself and think about how you want to respond. Now, it's always better to respond to any claim by asking a question. This gives you a significant advantage while putting the onus on the claimant to validate their claim. So perhaps a beginning or an opening question that you might ask, depending on the circumstances, could be, by what authority do you own the right to? Ask me that question, refuse me entry into this store, demand I agree to this medical intervention, give you my confidential data. You might be able to think of an even better question. So carry on. Okay, once you've asked your initial question, make sure you give the claimant the opportunity to respond. Remember, this is about having a conversation. It's about respecting your claimant and remembering that they too are a sovereign being. Now, I've listed some backup questions that you can follow up with once your claimant has had the opportunity to respond. What we're doing here, since we're talking about business owners and employees, is using Admiralty law to rebut the claim that's being made towards us, that the expectation that someone has of us. So we're going to do things like use legalese, which is legal language designed to intimidate or confuse us. Words such as lawful remedy, claim, compensation, and these will underline our rebuttal. We can also use media speak, which is the art of making the possible sound like a fact. Words such as could, might, possibly. And these are words which, under the early years propaganda program, we're groomed to see as factual rather than probable. And these words will also underline our rebuttal. Now, there's absolutely no need for you to read through the list of potential rebuttals you could use for varying circumstances, which I've listed in the slide. No need to use them verbatim or to try and learn them, because it really is a lot to remember. What I'm suggesting rather is that you get a feeling for the pattern of the words and choose those that resonate with you most strongly. That way you'll be standing in your power, not standing in my power. Okay, let's turn our attention to our employers and how to rebut them if they are expecting something from us which goes against the dictates of our conscience, which might be wearing a mask, for instance, or taking a test, or even a vaccination. Now, I've been asked about this quite a bit because it really is a very sensitive issue, especially as under the current system we need to go to work to earn money. But nevertheless, your employer has a duty of care towards you, and he's also subject to the contract that's been signed between you. So before you begin, it's worth taking a look at that contract to see whether or not it mentions anything about them having ownership over your health and well-being. Now, I think in the first instance, it's worth having an informal chat with your boss and maybe with a member of the human resources team to see if you can't resolve the situation with just a gentle conversation or a chat about your conscience and your way of thinking about the situation. It may be that you actually have a mask exemption, so you can show them that, and that will be your get out of mask free card. If that doesn't work, then I recommend you follow up the conversation by sending them a notice of conditional acceptance. Now, if you've watched my videos, you'll know that there is one on how to write a notice of conditional acceptance. If you haven't, go there and take a look so you can get some additional information on how to compose them. And once you've written your notice of conditional acceptance and you give them a certain amount of time in which to respond, it's okay to go about your business in the normal way, because until they respond with evidence and accountability, then they really don't have any authority over your health and well-being. If they then push or refuse to let you have entry onto the premises or threaten them with the sack, you might need to be prepared to take them to tribunal. So before you begin this process, think very carefully about whether or not you're prepared to take this as far as a tribunal. But do remember that without evidence and accountability, your employer doesn't have a leg to stand on. He employs you. He doesn't own you. This is the rebuttal that is on everybody's mind. How do I deal with a medical intervention? And I've actually really covered it in 3 of my 4 videos. The first one, empowering yourself and educating others during COVID, and medical matters, my second video, go into this quite extensively. So do take the time to watch them. Medical matters is all about how to refuse the interventions you don't want while pushing to get the ones that you do. And that's particularly important in my view at a time when waiting lists are really very long. In my last video, my 4th video, I've explained how to compose a notice of conditional acceptance. So if you haven't already watched that, take a look so you are armed with that information. It's important to decline rather than to refuse a medical intervention in order not to be seen as belligerent. It's important to ensure that the administrator of the intervention is properly qualified and understands the ingredients and purpose of the intervention and can explain the term informed consent to your satisfaction. Be sure to get the date and batch number of any vaccination or test that's being offered to you. Now, in this slide, I've put together a list of questions you could ask regarding the medical intervention. So do take the time to pause the video at your leisure leisure and read through them. Pick the ones that resonate most for you. There's no need to learn them verbatim. I just really want people to get a flavour of how to rebut medical interventions effectively. Now, if you think that the police or the army or some other government enforcement agents might be knocking at your door anytime soon, remember to put up the notice of implied consent to entry, which is linked below, as well as a notice of Article 61 of the Magna Carta, which I realise people are quite divided about as to whether it's been ratified or not. But what I would say about that is, regardless of whether it's ratified or not, it really is our duty at this time to point out tyranny when we come face to face with it. When it comes to the school, your children at school, I would propose that the best method of dealing with this is by way of a notice of conditional acceptance. If you haven't checked out the video that I've done on that, please do so. It's found on YouTube under Call to Action. So what you need to do is send in 2 copies, or hand in actually, to the headmistress or head teacher if you can, 2 copies of a notice of conditional acceptance. Send both sets of 2 copies to your local education authority and also to the head teacher of your child's school. And make sure that you ask that both are signed and that one of those copies is returned to you. If you want to send a stamped addressed envelope to the LEA, please do so. And also make sure that a copy is kept on your child's records, both with the LEA and also with the school that your child goes to. I've included a link to a notice of conditional acceptance that I wrote on behalf of a friend regarding medical interventions for her child while she was at school. It might be worth having a look at because it might help you to compose your own NCA. Now we come to the nitty-gritty, the moment you've all been waiting for. How do we deal with government enforcement agents? How do we avoid contracting with them? First of all, try to respond to their questions with a question of your own. So don't answer their questions, answer their question with another question. And I've put down a list of questions that you might use. Again, this is because it puts the onus on them to evidence their claim. Secondly, take a very deep breath and keep calm if you're dealing with a government enforcement agent. Remember that whatever your view of them, they're merely the visible representatives of the hidden controllers, and in fact, they are minions themselves, just like we are. They're not the enemy. In fact, our best strategy is to get them on side, and the best way to do this is to treat them with respect and talk to them, have a conversation with them rather than bark statements at them. Now, I've put together some questions that you might consider asking them in a polite, non-aggressive way. And once you've asked the question, has a crime been committed, or are you alleging a crime has been committed? If you haven't received a positive and affirmative response after you've asked it 3 times, you're actually free to go on the basis of failure to respond. Now, you may think that's quite a strong assertion, but I've actually done that myself. And on the 3rd question, when I've not had a positive affirmative response, I've actually turned and walked away from the police and had no real response. So it's a good thing to remember 3 times. You ask it 3 times, that question, and without a positive response, you can actually walk away. Now on this slide, I've put together a couple of cautions that you might want to use when dealing with a government enforcement agent. That may sound quite a strange thing to do, but really, if the government enforcement agent is acting out of jurisdiction, doesn't have any evidence, then you are well within your rights to give them a caution, letting them know that you do have the right, or you may intend to take a private criminal prosecution prosecution against them for unlawful detention or unlawful kidnap, or even aiding and abetting fraud, should they not be able to prove that the alleged SARS-CoV-2 actually exists. So this is perfectly within your rights. What I suggest is that you keep any conversation or any caution very friendly. Remember not to answer their questions if you possibly can, and if necessary, if you need to, state your refusal to stand under their authority or under Admiralty law, or to represent your straw man. Again, I'd like to emphasize that the whole point of this is about, or the whole point of effective rebuttal is about having a conversation. It's about treating claimants with respect. And why not, even if you despise their behavior, treat government enforcement agents with some respect in order to get them on side. I think that really is our best strategy at this time. Okay, so you may have done everything you can to remain calm, to remain friendly and polite, to ask questions, and it's all gone pear-shaped. The government enforcement agent has decided you're not playing ball. Maybe he thinks you're a bit of a know-it-all or way too challenging, and so a decision has been taken to arrest you and keep you overnight in a cell in order to intimidate you into submission, or perhaps because his ego has overtaken his logic. With the best intentions, this sometimes does happen, and we have to be prepared for it, especially if we are going to start to effectively rebut government enforcement agents. They're not used to it. They're used to being intimidating and getting their own way. So it may be that the result is that you get yourself unlawfully detained and kidnapped. So what to do if this happens? Well, remain calm and in control of yourself. Stick with refusing to answer questions and keep the conversation centered on evidence, the production of a victim, and the police or the government enforcement agent's own accountability. Refuse the on-duty defense solicitor because his role is to convince you to represent your straw man under Admiralty law. At some point, you will be asked to sign something. This is because Admiralty law is contractual and a contract needs a signature. So I've just put together this slide to show you how to sign a statement or a piece of paper returning your belongings. Remember that your name in block capitals is representative of your straw man. So if you see that, cross it out and write your name in the normal way. VC, V characters, means under duress. So you're signing to say that you're being forced to do this, basically. Remember also to sign your name right through the two notices, all rights reserved and non-waived ever. The best thing you can do in this situation is to chalk it down to experience, and remember that it's not always easy to be the vanguard, the ones leading the way so that others can follow. And you never know, your conduct may cause some government enforcement officials to actually even wake up. So in conclusion, I've included this quote from Lord Sumption as a reminder both to myself and to each of you watching not to give up the fight. We may be few in number, and sometimes it may seem futile when so many are blindly following the path of tyranny. But our role is to do our best to prevent that, and one day maybe we'll be thanked. In my personal view, and it is a personal view, what we're facing is a spiritual war, a war of souls rather than an actual physical war, and therefore how we behave, how we react and how we respond is crucial. Remain in honour, stand in your power and endeavour to win people over rather than push them away. I know from personal experience that this is not easy. So many times I've been myself over eager in my own rebuttals and come across as aggressive rather than confident and calm. But every now and then I get it spot on. We live, we learn. So it only remains now for me to remind you to check out my resource page where you can get information and websites where you can do your own research, and to thank you for your time, and I wish you Godspeed.